Since the time I was 24 years old in 1982, I started writing things down, and I'm on number 86 now. Here it is. Number 1 is on the bottom of that pile, and it started in April 1982. And I'm not creative in the way that someone said everybody's creative. I don't consider myself creative. For instance, I don't have ideas that I want to express, that I make up myself. I can't think of any personal projects I've ever done. I just don't work that way. The reason I became a designer, because I wanted people to come to me with problems that I could solve. I know how to do that. I can be creative then. I feel like I'm a doctor, and I can't just practice medicine on myself. So I need patients who are sick. The sicker the better, in fact. And so in the course of practicing my profession, I've come across, there's a couple of tips that I have that I think might be useful for productivity and how you actually get things done as opposed to just thinking up ideas that I'll share with you. The insides of these notebooks, because I'm not creative, they're not beautiful, there are no watercolors, in fact there's seldom any of these notebooks except notes that I take in meetings, then occasionally a drawing that I'll do to capture an idea that I might have that often is the wrong idea or gets superseded by an improved idea. But I managed to find 5 projects where I think I found the original drawing that kind of instigated the solution that you'll see, and there's, I hope, a lesson to be learned in each of these. Okay, lesson number 1 is everything I do comes from my patients, right? So I think I have a good bedside manner, and I'm often told, clients really like me because I really do listen to everything they say. They'd be frightened if they knew why, because I'm sitting there with a completely empty head, and I'm just dying for them to say something, anything that I'll be able to use to kind of come up with an idea that at that moment is completely elusive to me. Sometimes they come up with something. Yes, I've been doing this for so long that I have a couple of things that all old designers like me have that we do absent having a real idea. We have this. There's things you can do that look like design that are fairly convincing, but I won't show you any of those today. I'll try to show you what I think are some of the better ones. This is an old project, but one that was mentioned in the introduction for the Minnesota Children's Museum. You go to these children's museums and you look at their logos and graphics, and they're always adults imitating crayon drawings and those little figures that I've become very interested in that have pointy arms and legs and no genitalia and dots for heads. With rainbows or other things, and I just hate all that stuff. I really do. And you know who else hates it? Is kids hate that stuff too. Kids can tell that like adults think, hey kids, this is for you, it's fun. And this museum, they never use the F word. They sort of hate the idea of fun. They just don't say this will be fun. They just make it really be interesting and challenging and cool. It's in St. Paul. If any of you have been there, I think it's really one of the best children's museums in the whole country. When we were having our tour, they were going to this brand new building. Like all children's museums, they're a hands-on museum. But they also had this obsession with kind of balls and circles. They had their architects incorporate circles and balls into the architecture. Then they had a couple of things that involved like these big kind of globe type shapes. So I thought, well, maybe hands and globes might have. So you see that we've done this thing here that has, balls are there. Then you see that it's like hands holding balls. I thought maybe if you did hands holding balls, that could lead somewhere. But then I thought instead of doing kind of stupid drawings of those things, why don't we just actually commission real kids with real hands holding real plastic balls, and that could be sort of what. So you see the logo for it is actually a bunch of photographs that we took with this epic kind of casting session for junior hand models in training. So the whole identity basically kind of comes out of that single page that I did in the meeting with the client, and it all sort of looks like that. So it's just a series of those pictures. And then so look, that's one of those, they did that ball and they had these circles there, so that stuff was all there already. And then, thank God they only had 5 floors in this museum. 6 would have screwed us up. So for the boys and girls bathroom signs, we were sticking strictly with hands, and so we didn't want to get into other body parts. So we thought it'd be funny to have the hands hold these things like that. And then we did a signage detail that had the little ball mounting thing there. Giant hand. If you got lost, you'd meet your mom or dad or a babysitter, big sister, big brother at that hand. There's a hand holding a ticket at their auditorium. It gets torn in half, the hand as well as the ticket, every time a kid comes in and out. And then at the opening, they had this big epic display of the thing that they hung out there. The other thing is designers are told, the obvious is something, it's anathema. You have to avoid the obvious at all costs. Instead, embrace the obvious. The obvious can be your friend. No one else likes it. Everyone's always saying avoid the obvious. The obvious feels bad for itself. You know, the obvious is lonely. The obvious needs friends. Be friends to the obvious. And so the project that I sort of have to demonstrate that is I got a call back when Tibor Kalman was alive. I think he had already been diagnosed with cancer, and he was working on a monograph of his work. And I got a call from his publisher saying that Tibor had asked whether I'd be interested in designing his monograph, his book. And so I was like really thrilled and moved and honored, because I've been an admirer of M and Company. I assume you guys know, most of you know who Tibor Kalman is, but I was a real admirer of his work and had never worked at M and Company and knew a lot of people who had and always secretly wanted to work there. So I thought, oh, this would be my chance to kind of work at M and Company with Tibor Kalman. So I remember I went to the very first meeting and I had all these ideas about how I would do all these cool, funny, ironic, hip M and Company things that I'd never been allowed to do at Vignelli Associates, where I spent the first 10 years of my career. And Tibor listened really patiently and kind of with a bemused expression on his face and said, well, you know, those are interesting ideas, but another thing we might try is, what if you just sort of like did a really tight grid and kind of just sequenced some really clean pages for the whole book, and then at the very end we'll just like fuck it up just a little bit. And I said, like a clean, like a Vignelli sort of book? He said, yeah, exactly. Like, do it the way Massimo Vignelli would do it. That was my boss for 10 years. And so I said, so the cover should just be like your face with the word Tibor down the side. And I think I drew it in this book at that moment, and there's the drawing there, and that's how it turned out. And so it's just sort of like a package design of, like, you know, something you'd buy in Dwayne Reed or, you know, Gristedes or something, Tibor in a box. And the layouts are just really straightforward. They're just kind of a little bit of flush left type and like stuff on the page. None of my cool ideas that I thought were so non-obvious are there. Instead, the book is like nice and obvious. And guess what? The content kind of shows through. Something that I didn't remember being really interested in when we first started talking about it, but it's a useful thing to have the content actually come through. Okay, so number 3 is oftentimes the solution is right there in the problem. So we're in this building that happens to be a project that I contributed to a little bit. Our team did all the signage for it. And so if you've been admiring, we didn't do that exit sign, that's by code, but if you're admiring the bathroom signs, we did that. But the sign, those look like nothing. The sign that usually catches everyone's eye, that I get compliments on the ingenuity of, is the big sign on 8th Avenue, which is the New York Times logo that runs the entire length of the block and is about 15 feet tall. So if you didn't enter off of 8th Avenue and you don't mind being seen in public looking at a sign, you might want to go out that way, cross the street, and check it out, or I'll show you some pictures now. But basically, that sign is a curious sign, and I'll tell you what to look for when you look at it. Most communities have these rigid standards that forbid you to have big signs on your buildings. This district is different because this is the Times Square Special District, where, on the contrary, you're required to have big signs on your building. The subject of the previous project, Tibor Kalman, worked on a group that sort of set up these standards, and they were trying to preserve the character of Times Square in the face of what might have been development that would make it feel like Rockefeller Center South or Wall Street North. They wanted to have it feel noisy with big signs. So every building has to have signs on it, big signs. And the signs, moreover, have to be applied to the building. They can't be integrated into the building. They have to be stuck on the building. You know, ugly, flashy Times Square type signs, right? So the New York Times has some clout in town, and they were able to kind of like back off some of these requirements. They had hired a fantastic architect in whose work you are currently dwelling, Renzo Piano from Genoa and Paris, and he had done this beautiful, pristine, perfectly resolved tectonic building with all these horizontal light screens all the way around made of ceramic rods. And when they came to us, they said, we've got this problem. The Times has managed to kind of back them off. We don't have multiple signs. We just need like one big sign on the building on the 8th Avenue side, but it has to be stuck on. And people will work behind the sign in those offices, so we don't want to impede their view. And so this is from that meeting, and you see it says the sign has to need to be visible day and night, must not block view from behind. And so I remember saying in that meeting, what if we just stuck some things on the rods, and then you could do this thing where if you stuck enough things in the rods, it would look like the logo. And people had no idea what I was talking about. So I had to make this model out of dowel rods. And see that sort of is the T from the New York Times. right? So that's me showing it at a meeting. And I said, look, you'd stick these rods on and it would work, I thought. So then so it's made up of, the sign you'll see is made up of almost 800 separate little pieces that are stuck to all these rods. They end up being beaks as opposed to things sticking straight out. This is it being assembled, and there it is on the building. That's a real picture of it. That's what you see when you look up. Because they're shaped like that, when you look from below, it looks opaque, but if you look out from inside, you can barely see it. Now, the only thing I didn't get is I really wanted them to do it white on white, so it would be like a blind embossed logo on the building. People are nodding. Isn't that a great idea, designers? It's so cool. And then I was saying, you know, you'd go by, and depending on how the light was, you'd see it sometimes and not see it other times. I remember saying this like to the management group of the New York Times, realizing after examining their facial expressions that I was trying to convince them to spend a lot of money putting a ginormous sign in their building that people might not be able to read. And then finally, the publisher said, well, our logo is black on the paper, so why don't we make the sign black? I'm like, okay. So he wasn't avoiding the obvious. See, I was being too tricky. Good for him. So there it is at night. I think it's actually I think it's a lovely sign myself, and it's no more than the byproduct of those requirements. It had to be stuck on, you had to see from behind. Any of you guys would have worked out the same solution, I'm convinced. But I didn't, I get all the credit for it, thank God. All that aside, though, if you have an obsession, you should just kind of go for it and work it out. And so there's a new museum up on Columbus Circle called Museum of Arts and Design. You can see that we developed this special alphabet for it, that I have many, many pages that have this stuff in it. And it comes out of the fact that the building sits on Columbus Circle, which is there. It is a square building, and that idea of combining circles and squares led us to make this logo that looks like that then can take these different forms like that, you know, be made out of different things and have different stuff. But then we did this whole alphabet like that out of the same thing, that you're not actually like the exit signs in the building don't look like that because I think it would be hard to read and perhaps kill people who are fleeing a fire or something else. But it actually was this kind of funny encoded thing. We had it actually designed as a font so you could, like, you know, copy and paste the Gettysburg Address or the Lord's Prayer, and it would all be in this font. It just looked great. So there you see a lot of it there. And this was because we were just obsessed with it. We just kept doing it over and over again. The clients sort of like kind of kept saying, we did it so, and we got used to being able to read it. And because we were so obsessed with it, we managed to get the client used to reading it too. So there's a small group of people who think this is a legible font. Other people just sort of see it and associate it with the museum, but it sort of works. And then it also has like a lot of great applications in the ubiquitous gift shop, et cetera, fashion items, and a cute t-shirt. If you can read this, you are MAD. So finally, this is the ultimate thing. This is also, I believe, the message of the New Testament. Love is the answer. This is one of my favorite projects that I have a little update on. I've been working on it for 10 years. I was asked by a group called the Robin Hood Foundation to help out with this series of libraries they were installing in public schools around New York City with the help of a lot of really good architects. They were going to take schools that either had really run-down horrible libraries or in some cases no libraries at all and install new libraries, and they asked me to be sort of the graphic design coordinator of all these libraries. First there were 10, then there were 30 more, and now there are 30 more. And the way they described it, they said, oh, you know, what we need is a logo for this project. So as a designer, I sort of get that. Oh, a logo, right? So that's what the libraries look like before, if they have one. Sometimes they don't have one at all, but that's like no joke. It's kind of like not, well, you know, any library is good. And if there are books on the shelves, I swear to God, it works on some level. But it doesn't attract kids to come in, and it's not a great place for the librarians to work either, which ends up being a key part of the whole thing. And so I came up with this logo that I was quite proud of that had like this library there with a little exclamation point. Then I designed all these things that I don't know why they would need them, but like shopping bags and stuff, you know, t-shirts, you know. Like, remember the t-shirt that your school library had? No, they don't have t-shirts. So, and then I thought the thing under the thing under there could be made out of smiley faces or baseballs. You know, I got really excited about like playing out this logo, and like, I got really mixed up. But they indulged me and they let me do this. There's the logo itself. But actually, the real problem with these libraries eluded me until I started working on it with the architects, and it's on this page here. They're for elementary schools, and they're in mostly old buildings. These old buildings have tall ceilings, you know, 12 foot, 14 foot, 16 foot. The kids can only reach so high, though, like maybe 6 feet. That means that these are the shelves, and that space up there no one knew what to do with. And so finally, one of the meetings, it wasn't in my scope of work, and I said, well, I could come up with some stuff to go there, I guess. And they said, oh, could you? And I said, yeah, I guess. So the first time we showed them a comp and said, what if we just took portraits of the kids in the school and put their faces up there really big, so it made it feel like you were like if you were in the place, you felt like you were in a dollhouse, and the real kids were looking in at you over the shelves. So we had no budget at all. We were doing all this pro bono. My wife, who had studied photography in college but wasn't really a photographer, shot these pictures of the kids, and the first one looked like that. But I thought we'd only do it once. But then all the librarians who saw it said, well, what will my mural look like? And so suddenly we were in this mural business, and that's where love really had to get into it. So when I say love is the answer, what I mean is if you do what you love and you find other people who do what they love, you'll be successful, you'll do great work. Chances are you'll actually make money, miraculously enough. If you combine that with a bit of egotism and taste for the spotlight, you could also become famous. But definitely, I promise you'll be happy, okay? And so what we did was, I started out with my wife, who was my high school sweetheart, the only girl I've ever kissed. So she did a couple of these libraries. Then we brought in an illustrator named Lynn Pauley, and she did a bunch of them. I always kind of like felt sheepish saying, you know, I've got this space above the shelves. Would you mind helping me with that? Then this last round, I just thought, oh, fuck it. I'm just going to ask whoever I want to do it and see who says yes. And so we just made this list of people we thought would be fun to have work on this project, and they all said yes. So this is Peter Arkell, and he did a great, great installation, all black and white, based on interviews he did with the kids where they talked about their favorite books. This one is Rafael Esquer from Studio Alfalfa. 1 million silhouettes based on things in the books. This is Christoph Niemann, who you know probably from the New York Times and the New Yorker. He's incorporated an image of a book into every one of those drawings, whether it's Lincoln's beard, Moby Dick's mouth, etc. It's an amazing, amazing drawing. Stefan Sagmeister took one of his aphorisms and kind of spun it out over there. And finally, Myra Coleman did this extraordinary installation that our whole office had to go help her install. That was just collecting all these different things and kind of getting a way to kind of just installing them in this kind of weird, kind of quizzical way, so kids will, for generations perhaps, be looking up there trying to figure out what the blue violin means. You know what the blue violin means, but what that M stands for. Lots of pictures of Lincoln in these libraries. So all these things are there, and you have to take a trip to see them. They're not they're not like in the handy parts of town. They're up in the Bronx. They're way out in Brooklyn. But they're things that I think we'll be leaving behind for the first kids who we did our first libraries for. My wife's library. Those kids are out of high school now. And the kids that are coming in here are just getting started with these. So hopefully we'll be able to go on with this, just basically as a labor of love for everyone to participate. And this is why it works as a labor of love. Every time they have one of these libraries open, the school organizes this little kind of opening ceremony with balloons and stuff, with like kids greeting them at the door, with like a presentation where kids read poetry that they wrote. And then afterwards you get to see kids enjoying the library. And so when we were going around talking to the librarians after this, one librarian said, I have all these different lights in the library, and the lights that light up the mural is on its own track. And when I shut down every night, I leave that light on for an extra moment, look around at the kids, and that reminds me why I'm doing this, then I turn it off. And so that's my lesson too. Remember who you're doing it for, remember why you're doing it, and you will not go wrong. Thank you.